The first conference I went to as Director of Finance in Atlanta was in 1976, and it was in Boston. And I remember walking into the assembly room at the registration and opening reception, and it was a sea of white hair and Roman collars. And I was 31 years old at the time, and I couldn't believe it. It was incredible. By the time of my last conference in 1993, it was just the opposite. It was young people, it was lay people, a lot of women religious. It was just a totally different picture.
Since the Second Vatican Council, there has been an emphasis and an encouragement that laymen and women be much more involved in the life and activity of the church. They can advise the bishop on how best to maintain, to protect, as well as to use the resources of the church in order to be able to further the mission.
We're all called by Jesus to follow him. And so what's that discipleship role that each one of us has? And so what the DFMC sees in its 50 years is from 40 priests to 30 laymen to 1 bishop. Today, our membership in the United States, Canada, the Caribbean, the Pacific Islands is probably about 95% lay people. That's one of the good news stories that we don't hear a lot about. That there is a lot of co-responsibility. There is a great deal of participation at the highest levels of the church in guiding the future.
My first conference was in 1982. This is my 37th conference. We are a very, very small rural diocese, but we still had the same issues, and it gave me a network. So I would be involved with people from New York and California, and they would be interested in our story as well. So you really form strong bonds and relationships that, in my case, have lasted 37 years.
If we were just by ourselves, in our own little pond, if you will, we wouldn't have the resources to be able to meet the challenges that we face every single day in and day out.
You know, if you have a problem, you have a challenge or something, somebody else had the same challenge. So don't recreate the wheel, just go out and ask for help. And people are very, very willing to share information. For me, the DFMC has been an endless flow of useful information.
Because there's really nobody else locally that I can turn to who has the same, the financial expertise, if you will, and background that I have. I mean, yes, we have a finance office and we have very capable and good people there, but they're looking to me for the most part to lead it. So where do I turn? And so this is the group I would turn to. I think my story is probably similar to a lot of diocesan finance officers. I mean, I wanted to kind of mesh my professional life with my faith life. And I think that's true with the vast majority of folks here at this conference.
We're not always just the nerdy accountants, although I tell people I'm a nerdy accountant because that is the type of work that I do. But I do love what I do. And the role that I've assumed and fill at the diocese has been one of great growth, professionally and personally.
I worked for Coca-Cola for about 20 years and then got a phone call from the Archbishop to serve as his chief financial officer. I thought about it and at first said no, didn't think it was the right thing for me. I loved working at Coca-Cola, the product, the customers, everything was great. I thought I'd be there for my whole career. I cannot now look back and not imagine being with a diocese. These are my friends, this is my church, these are the people I want to serve.
I never dreamed I would be a finance officer for the church. About 10 years ago, I just hit there's got to be more than this. It's not about the numbers, it's not about the bottom line. And I interviewed with the diocese and thought, this is it. This is where I can help people and make a difference. It doesn't always go the way you think it's going to, but even on the bad days, I love my job. I love my job, and I feel like I do make a difference.
If you want to look at one of the most important points of the church today, one of the most necessary things in any not-for-profit, but certainly in the church world, especially in a Christian environment, is accountability, it's transparency, it's doing things right, and what the DFMC does is it's a mechanism, it's a way to get it right, to make sure that we're doing things correctly, to make sure that we're on top of our game and responding to needs and making sure we have the resources to do the ministry that God called us to do.
Right before I came, they had for the first time hired a lay chief financial officer who was also the chancellor. And he was feeling overwhelmed when he had to face the huge challenges of the finances of the diocese and the debts. And 6 months after I was here, he said, I can't do this anymore. I was kind of panicky, to tell the truth, because I was here only 6 months. I was still just learning the challenges that we face, and now my chief financial officer and chancellor is telling me he's resigning.
I came in with basically 5 priorities, amongst many others, but primarily creating a culture of service, financial transparency, talent acquisition, financial sustainability, and making sure that our lay pension plan was shored up, because that was a significant problem as well.
Some people say that, we're not a business, we are a church, we are doing mission, and it's true about that. But we also running a business in a certain sense, because we have to maintain the buildings, we have to pay the staff.
We have 79 parishes, 21 schools, number of affiliates like Catholic Charities, St. Vincent Services. We run 5 independent nursing homes. So when you add up all of those parishes, schools, and affiliates, we have a little bit over 3,500 employees. So if you look at an organization like that, the size and scope, it would rival a large company. And that's no different than any other diocese and archdiocese across the country. Anyone watching this will say, yep, I get it, we're a mile wide and an inch deep. But you're only as good as the people around you. And the folks that we've been able to acquire, not only the full-time employees, but the volunteers, it's been unbelievable. I knew coming down here that God would put people on my path to help me, and that definitely has been the case.
I worked for 40 years in banking, investments, retirement, and trusts. I was asked to join the finance committee for the diocese, which I was glad to do, and started the process of evaluating what the accounts look like. And when we first figured it all out, we had saved the diocese about $400,000 in fees.
If the DFMC did not exist, where would you go to? And I wouldn't know where to go to. I like to describe the DFMC as our faith is very ordered, and the administration of that faith is very ordered. However, the execution of that administration can be very disordered. So the DFMC is designed to bring order to that disorder.
The involvement of the laity in the mission of the church is something that's very dear to me. I am happy to see and happy to say that we have a wonderful number of engaged laity in our Diocesan Finance Council, in our Diocesan Pastoral Council, and I'm encouraging every pastor to do the same, to engage the laity in helping them revitalize the parishes and bring their expertise, their gifts and talents to help in that process.
The issues facing our church are very complex. The scandals, yes, it is a scandal, because we've not been truly faithful to our mission. But we're human, and I understand that. But it's painful. It's very, very painful.
all of us who have a great love for the church know that what we're called to is something that is greatly challenging. It's something that calls forth from us heroic a response of virtue and of love. We all, in a way, are going to fall short of that because we all struggle with our own sinfulness and our own weakness and inadequacies. But we are also all receive the grace of the Spirit, and we also are encouraged that the Lord will sustain us no matter what the challenges we face personally, professionally, in the church or outside the church.
One of the things that I've learned through years is that you have to embrace the pain. You have to incorporate, if you will, the imperfection, the conflict, the negativity, and perhaps for me, from a spiritual perspective, it's what they call the folly of the cross, death and resurrection. It all feels like death when you're going through it. But you just have to hold it, and you have to hold one another, and you show up, you pay attention, you tell the truth, and you try not to get too attached to the results. You kind of leave that to God to let it unfold over time.
And that means each one of us personally have to make a choice. Do we embrace Paschal mystery? Do we embrace Christ and the fullness of what he experienced, which is his willingness to suffer so that sin might be overcome? Because we're going to encounter both sin and the effects of it at every level in our experience in life. Well, then how do we understand that, and how do we then either accept that and then make the passage through it united with him, accepting our share in those sufferings, making also that passage through death to resurrection in Christ in the life of the church.
In the 1990s, our archdiocese went through a lot of litigation, and we settled more than 200 cases. But the hope that came out of that era is that we went through reform, education, policies, zero tolerance, and so on. And that was pivotal in the life of the church in the Archdiocese of Santa Fe. And I tell our current Archbishop Wester that, if we wouldn't have gone through reform, I probably wouldn't be there, because I would have been disillusioned, disappointed, and I wouldn't want to be part of an institution that just did not change. But thankfully, through God's guidance, we made a lot of changes, and we're much better for it, and I'm happy for it. So.
We've allowed things to happen that never should have seen the light of day, never should have happened. And so there's a financial part to that, and there's a way that those who have responsibility for management and finance can make sure that it doesn't ever happen again. And so since then, we've become much more professional, much more accountable. We have certification programs. We have programs of formation. We call our memberships to the best practices possible in everything they do, because this is the way we can help the church. This is the way we can help the bishop in the local church. This is the way we can help all the people to make sure that the money they give, the resources, their children, everything we're doing is in a protected environment, and it allows for us to focus on the mission of the church, which is to bring the love of God to everybody.
The DFMC has been a lifeline to me and to my peers, because it's not just about the conference, or it's not just about the annual meeting that we attend every year, but it's all of the other learning opportunities that go into that, the CDFM program, the continuing education courses that have been developed, and that gives everyone an opportunity to continue learning outside of 1 week together at the annual conference.
The DFMC is a place where you come to, take a breath out of your life once a year. They're also out there with a website and with support that way, but you take a breath once a year to be with your peers, your colleagues from throughout the country, and you have a chance to learn from them, to learn from the presentations that are given to us, and to support one another and care about one another and pray with one another. And it actually is a place of joy, it's a place of hope that kind of sends you back into the arena, if you will, and you're ready to try again.
The one thing I will say about the annual meeting is that it is a lot about spirituality and coming together as church. And it's not just meetings with technical knowledge information. I think we have to bring ministry along with the finances to our position.
When I come every year, I get to see my friends from all over the country, from Canada, from the Caribbean, from Guam. And it's like a homecoming. It's like a reunion. And that's a joyful occasion. And I would want that for everyone.